What's up, Divas Nation? I'm Gary Cook, and this is another episode of Divas Dive. And this is a new format for us. We are starting our smaller weekly recaps here in video form, so we can try to cover more content quicker and get stuff out to you guys sooner. So after Smackdown, we'll be shooting a video that will cover Raw and Smackdown, talk about our thoughts from this week's episodes, the highs, the lows, and my personal opinions on them. And then we will be releasing throughout the week a blog post about our winner/winners and our potential losers of the week from the different shows. We're going to try to do one for main roster, one for NXT, and then a cover-up of all the stuff we watched from the indies to keep you guys up to date on what's happening, what we think is important, what I liked, what I didn't like, and where I see things going, and what things you should be checking out in case you missed it, or if you're on the fence about it. Hopefully we can help you make a better choice about it and be able to catch the things that are worth catching and skip some of the stuff that's not as good, so that way only we have to suffer through it and you guys don't. So with that said, this week was not a good week for the main roster when it comes to WWE and the women. On Monday, the high point was Lacey Evans' promo. The low points were everything else. And then on SmackDown, the high point was Charlotte versus Bayley, and the low point was everything else. So we'll start with Raw and then progress to SmackDown. The first thing on Raw was a Naomi versus Billie Kay match, and it lasted maybe a minute. I mean, it didn't do anything for anybody. It was another loss for the champions, which made their third straight loss in a row. And the only win they've had since becoming champions was against the Brooklyn Bellas, which was a perfectly devised match to make them look like they were going to be these awesome heel champions. And then ever since then, they've just been booking them to lose and eat all the pinfalls, which has been awful. We're getting great iconic promos before the matches, and then these awful squash matches afterwards that do nothing to build the credibility of the Iconics or the tag team belts. So Naomi came out, squashed Billie Kay. It was a rinse and repeat, real easy. Sorry, cat was distracting me there. It was a real easy match where nothing of significance happened. The win doesn't help Naomi. The loss hurts the Iconics. And it was a joke of a match. I mean, if you're going to spend that little time on the match, why not just put that time towards something else and not even bother? It just makes the women's revolution that they're touting seem like a big farce and like it was an entire big ploy just to boost up Ronda Rousey, and that was it. Because that's the only person that women's revolution has made anything out of is Ronda. The rest of the roster has all suffered for it and is continuing to suffer. And this is just another example of tossing out two people out there and giving them no time to work and no real direction or reason to work towards anything, and it left everybody just annoyed that they wasted that time hoping for something good as they saw some of their favorites come out. The next event that happened for the women was Becky Lynch came out. She cut a promo. The plus side, she didn't mention Ronda. She finally got past that and started talking about looking to the future and being a fighting champion and defending things, made some pot shots at Lacey. But she just seemed uninterested, bored. She was out there because she had to be out there, but there was none of the usual Becky spark was there in her promo compared to past weeks. So it was a forgettable promo from her. Lacey came down. Lacey is really good at her heel work. You don't have to like her as a person, you don't have to like her as a character, but as far as being the villain in the story, she's great at it. She gets the audience to hate her, she gets the other women in the match to hate her, and she's really good at bantering with Becky on social media, which is something that Becky hasn't had, because Ronda was awful at Twitter, Charlotte barely uses Twitter, and Alexa and Ember have been awful at the Twitter game as well. So it's nice to see Lacey being able to go toe-to-toe with Becky and verbally spar with her. That's a nice change of pace. She played her part to a T. She hit her high notes like she should have. She got the crowd against her. My only complaint is the awful southern accent she uses. I really wish they would either find a way to make it work better for her or just ditch it. But some people I've been told like it, some don't. So, I mean, that's not really a win or lose. It's just a personal preference of, I could do without that. So then Becky had a match with Alicia Fox, and oh, this was awful. There were botches. They both looked lost. Neither one looked like they knew what spot came next. They wandered around the outside of the ring for a bit, trying to find like forgot what they were even doing out there. There was a big botch where they both tripped each other up or something and nearly missed it. The finish was just clunky and awkward and kind of happened out of nowhere. My best guess is the ref kind of looked at Becky and told her to wrap it up and take that one home because it was going nowhere. The first section of the match started out pretty good. I was like, all right, we're going to get a decent match between Becky and Alicia. That's good. Hopefully it'll build Alicia up, give us somebody else on Raw that will be competitive and give us somebody for her to work off of. But then we came back from commercial, and then the wheels just fell off, and everything was a train wreck from then on out. And it was just a disaster dumpster fire. At this point, when that match ended, I thought Becky was probably beelining for being the worst of the week in the first ever thing here, which was quite surprising because she's been pretty solid for the most part leading into WrestleMania with a few missed spots here and there, but nothing to the degree of what she missed on Monday. That was just like a huge disaster, and it exposed some issues that I kind of knew Becky had, but I hadn't really paid much thought to until now. We'll talk about those at the end because they do crop up again in Smackdown a little bit, and noticing how I think my theory is accurate. So we'll talk about that at the end, but it definitely put some holes in Becky's armor if you were willing to look at her and be honest about what she's accomplished in the ring so far. So let's fast forward to SmackDown, and the night kicked off with Kairi Sane, Asuka with Asuka and Paige against Peyton Royce with Billie Kay. Another squash match. It lasted maybe 30 seconds. It buries the champions again. It didn't help the Paige's team any. I don't know what to call them. They need a tag team name, because until then they're just kind of Paige's team. It didn't really do them any good. I mean, Kairi Sane looked strong because she had all the offense. Billie Kay got no offense. We got another good Iconics promo with them coming down to the ring, being the dorks they are as they just bury people. But they let her have zero offense. And it's just, I don't think the WWE even cares about the women's tag team titles. I don't think they want to develop them. I don't think they want to grow them. I don't think they want to push them. I think that's why they took them off Sasha and Bayley, because they didn't want to have to live up to their end of the bargain about it. I mean, with the way they're treating those tag team titles, I feel like they're just there for them to throw the women they don't want to do anything with into something and be like, see, we gave them something. We support our women. They have these other belts now they can fight over, and just leave it at that. The match was forgettable. I don't even remember. I think Kairi Sane run with her big elbow drop, and that was basically the entire match. We got another Becky promo tonight with Charlotte. This was a much better promo. It seems like Becky's A game comes out around Charlotte, and against the people that Becky deems below her, we get her C or D level game, because the Monday night promo versus the Tuesday night promo are night and day. On SmackDown, she was there all cylinders firing, and she was ready to go toe-to-toe with Charlotte and bring her A game. On Raw, she looked like she couldn't be bothered to be there, and she was just counting on the minutes till she got to go back to the back and be done with her job altogether. Bayley came out and injected herself into the promo. I really like this version of Bayley. It's a bit of a return to the NXT version, where she's happy-go-lucky, she's fun-loving, but at the same time, she takes the ring work very seriously. When she's in there, she's going to do what it takes to win. We got a Charlotte versus Bayley match. Winner would be facing Becky at Money in the Bank for the Smackdown Women's title. It was a really good match. Best match of the week for the main roster women. Lots of back and forth, great selling on both parts. Bayley is one of those people that can work with anybody and have a pretty good match because her style meshes with anybody's style, because it's not a very complex technical style that you have to try to work up to. You can work with her style and she can complement almost any style and make it look good. And that was on display here again, as both her and Charlotte looked really strong in the match. Unfortunately, Charlotte got the win, and we're on to another Charlotte versus Becky match at Money in the Bank, because that's just what we all wanted, was more Charlotte versus Becky. And that wrapped up the women on SmackDown. So really not much happened for the women this week on the main roster. It was all pretty pathetic, boring, and awful. The only real high part is Lacey's heel work and the Bayley versus Charlotte match. Other than that, we saw absolutely nothing from the women that's worth noting. The rest of it was just all squashes and just jokes of what a match should be. And it was bad. This week was just depressing to watch. Like, if this is how it's going to be hard to keep covering main roster, because this was like a return to just like the pudding matches, because there was no value in anything that they were putting out for the women this week. But what I mentioned earlier is what we did see is the flaw in Charlotte and Becky as your top two is they both work very unique styles that are very much their own, and they don't mesh with every single person. It's real easy to not have chemistry with them at times because of the high technical level of Charlotte and the way her moves work, and because of some of the pacing and the brawling into technical moves of Becky's style. We saw that Alicia and Becky did not mesh well at all. We saw that Ronda did not mesh with Becky or Charlotte at all. And that's going to be a real problem as they're trying to build up these other women coming up behind them, is they're having a hard time coming up with legitimate feeling threats for Becky's belts, because getting her style to mesh with people isn't always the easiest. And you really need to be building up those other talents with somebody like a Bayley or a Sasha, or even a Mickie James or an Asuka, who can work with pretty much anybody's style and make you look good. It's hard to have a bad match with Asuka. It's hard to have a bad match with Sasha. It's hard to have a bad match with Bayley at times, if you get Bayley's A game, like we got tonight. And those are the women that are considered top tier that could really be elevating a Ruby Riott, a Nikki Cross, an Alexa Bliss, who else do they have? Rebuilding Mickie James, rebuilding Alicia Fox, getting Natalie to being seen as more of a Fed, helping to build Liv Morgan, building Sarah Logan. Those women need to be built up so that when they get put on the stage with Becky and Charlotte, people get behind them because they've seen them compete with top-level stars that the crowd perceives as being on the same level as Becky and Charlotte. But putting them out there with Becky and Charlotte, who do their best but aren't always going to be able to make a good match come out of it, is a problem. Ruby and Becky wasn't bad, but that's more because Ruby can work with most people and get a good match out of them. Ruby got a good match out of Ronda when they had more than 30 seconds to do something with. She got a pretty decent match that kind of worked, because Ruby is a very good ring veteran as well. And I feel like that's where Becky and Charlotte are weakest as champions, is they're very good at getting over, they're very good at getting the crowd behind them or against them, but they're very good at putting on great matches with people they mesh with, but they seem to have a hard time at times gelling with talents that don't work similar styles to them, or that they don't work with very often, where it feels like if you let Alicia Fox, say, run the house show circuit with Becky for 5, 6, 7 weeks before you put her on TV, they might have a good match because they got chemistry going. Whereas if you throw somebody in the ring with Sasha or Bayley or Asuka, that first match is usually pretty solid because they're very good at tailoring their styles to work in those initial matches to get the feeling and the chemistry going, where I feel like Becky and Charlotte don't scale down to meet people at their level to help bring them up over the course of a few matches, they start fully throttled, and then the other girls try to get up to that full throttle, but they just can't. And I feel like that was heavily on display on Raw this week when Alicia Fox was facing Becky, was you saw Becky had her foot to the floor going her full-blown style, and they hadn't had time to really mesh and connect and get something that worked between them, and they both suffered for it and looked pretty awful. So that's my thoughts on the week so far. Be sure to comment and let us know what you thought of this week's Raw and SmackDown. Tell me if I'm crazy. Tell me if you think I'm right. And let us know what you think of the announced Money in the Bank matches of Becky versus Lacey and Becky versus Charlotte, and where you think they're going to go with this. You guys have a great rest of your week. We'll see you again when we cover NXT and NXT UK, if there's anything to do with it, and then our Indies video later in the week. We'll also be putting out a Superstar Shakeup week to talk about the complete destruction of the women's tag division and my winners and losers for the shakeup on both shows and how I see things potentially playing out for all the women after the initial shakeup and then all the reshuffling of this week's brands. Have a great night, guys. I'm Gary Cook. This has been Divas Dive. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time when we talk more women's wrestling.